Crimson drops fell from bruised lips onto cold dirt. Day after day, she endured vicious strikes, guarding one fragile secret. Packmates called her pathetic. Everyone thought her weak, until an icy northern king arrived, saw her shattered bones, and unleashed brutal wrath no one ever saw coming. Pain was not just a feeling for Harper Sullivan. It was a geography she had memorized. She knew the exact ache of a fractured rib on a rainy Tuesday, the throbbing pulse of a split lip on a freezing Thursday morning, and the blinding white flash behind her eyes when a grown man's fist collided with her cheekbone. Harper lived in a rusted, single-wide trailer on the furthest, dampest edge of the Blackwood Ridgepack lands, hidden deep in the dense, rain-soaked forests off Route 26 in Oregon. To the human world, Blackwood Ridge was just a private logging community. To the wolves who lived there, it was a dictatorship ruled by Alpha Declan Hayes. Declan was a cruel, vain man who masked his deep-seated insecurities with violence, and Harper was his favorite punching bag. But Harper wasn't weak. Every single blow she took was a calculated, deliberate transaction. She was a lightning rod, drawing the storm away from the only thing that mattered, her 12-year-old brother, Toby. Toby was born an Omega, just like Harper. At least, that was what the pack registry said. But 3 years ago, during his first feverish pre-shift, Toby's eyes hadn't flashed the standard yellow or brown of a subservient wolf. They had burned a brilliant, terrifying silver. He possessed the bloodline of a true alpha, a genetic anomaly that skipped a dozen generations, a throwback to the ancient sovereign kings. If Declan, a man terrified of losing his precarious grip on the pack, ever found out that a true alpha was growing up in his own slums, he would snap Toby's neck without a second thought. So, Harper made a choice. She dyed Toby's hair a dull, mousy brown, ordered cheap brown contact lenses from a human pharmacy in Portland using a fake name, and taught him to shrink his posture, to look at the ground, to mumble. And most importantly, Harper became the biggest, most insufferable problem Declan Hayes had ever dealt with. She talked back. She accidentally spilled boiling coffee on his prized Italian leather shoes. She deliberately botched the washing of his expensive SUVs. She did everything in her power to ensure that when Declan woke up angry, his rage was directed entirely at her. As long as she kept the spotlight of his fury firmly on her bruised back, Toby stayed invisible in the shadows. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the air thick with the smell of wet pine and incoming storms, when the worst beating of the month occurred. Harper was in the packhouse kitchen, aggressively scrubbing a cast-iron skillet, her knuckles raw. Toby was sitting in the corner, peeling potatoes. He was supposed to be at the pack school, but they had expelled him the week prior for insubordination, which really just meant a Beta's kid had pushed him, and Toby hadn't cried. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors of the kitchen swung open. Alpha Declan marched in, his face flushed red with fury, trailed by his sycophant enforcer, Liam Foster. Declan had just gotten off the phone with the regional council, and the negotiations hadn't gone his way. He needed an outlet. His dark, cold eyes swept the kitchen and landed on Toby. The boy had accidentally dropped a potato peel on the pristine linoleum floor. "You!" Declan snarled, his voice vibrating with the low, oppressive frequency of alpha command that forced weaker wolves to their knees. "Pick that up with your teeth, you useless little runt." Toby froze, his small shoulders trembling. The command pushed against his hidden, dormant alpha nature, and for a terrifying second, Harper saw his jaw clench in defiance. No, Harper thought, panic seizing her chest. Not him. Look at me. Harper slammed the cast-iron skillet down onto the stainless steel counter with a deafening crang. "He's not a dog, Declan," Harper spat, wiping her soapy hands on her apron, stepping squarely between the alpha and her brother. And maybe if you spent less time bullying children and more time learning how to actually govern a pack, the council wouldn't hang up on you. The entire kitchen went dead silent. The 3 other Omega cooks stopped breathing. Liam Foster took a step back. Declan's eyes snapped to Harper. The rage shifted, locking onto her with laser precision. "What did you say to me, you worthless bitch?" "I said you're a failure," Harper lied, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "You're a weak alpha who takes his frustrations out on Omegas because the real alphas in this state laugh behind your back." Declan lunged. The first blow caught her in the stomach, lifting her off her feet and sending her crashing into the flour bins. A cloud of white dust exploded into the air as she hit the ground hard. Before she could gasp for breath, Declan was on her. His heavy steel-toed boot caught her ribs. Once. Twice. The sickening crack echoed in the large kitchen. "Harper!" Toby screamed, trying to run to her. But Liam grabbed the boy by the scruff of his neck, holding him back. "Watch her learn her place, boy," Liam sneered. Harper curled into a tight ball, protecting her head and neck, a survival instinct honed over years of abuse. She tasted pennies, the familiar flavor of her own blood welling up from a bitten tongue. She kept her eyes locked on Toby through the haze of pain, offering him a tiny, reassuring nod. "I'm okay. Don't show them your eyes. Don't shift." When Declan finally tired, he stood over her, breathing heavily, straightening his expensive cuffs. "Clean this mess up," Declan barked at the terrified kitchen staff. He looked down at Harper, who was coughing up blood onto the white flour-covered floor. "And you're working the banquet this weekend. The Northern King is coming to finalize the border treaty. If you so much as look at him wrong, I won't just beat you, Harper. I will throw you in the solitary pits until you rot." He turned on his heel and stormed out. Harper lay there for a long moment, the world spinning. Dr. Emmett Walsh, an older, weary beta who ran the local pack clinic, eventually sneaked in through the back door an hour later. He handed her a bottle of human-grade ibuprofen and a roll of athletic tape. "You're going to get yourself killed, Harper," Dr. Walsh whispered, as he helped her bind her broken ribs in the cramped employee bathroom. "Declan is on edge. King Kalen Cross is no joke. They say the Northern Wolves are practically feral. If you pull a stunt in front of him, Declan will execute you to save face." "I know," Harper rasped, wincing as the tape tightened around her bruised torso. "But as long as he's hitting me, he isn't looking at Toby." 4 days later, the temperature in Blackwood Ridge plummeted, as if the forest itself knew who was coming. A convoy of 6 matte black, armored SUVs rolled down the dirt road, leading to the main pack house, their tires chewing up the Oregon mud. Harper stood on the sprawling front porch with the rest of the serving staff, her head bowed, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Beneath her crisp white, high-collared shirt, her ribs screamed in agony with every breath. A layer of heavy human concealer hid the darkest purple bruises on her cheek, but her split lip was still visibly swollen. The vehicle doors opened, and the air instantly changed. It felt heavier, charged with a raw, crackling electricity that made the hair on Harper's arms stand up. Out stepped King Kalen Cross. He didn't look like a politician, and he certainly didn't look like Declan in his tailored suits. Kalen was a mountain of a man, clad in dark denim, heavy boots, and a thick woolen jacket. His dark hair was slightly overgrown, pushed back from a face carved from granite. But it was his eyes that stole the breath from the courtyard, a piercing, icy blue that seemed to strip away every secret in the immediate vicinity. He exuded an aura of absolute, terrifying power. It wasn't the frantic, demanding power of Declan. It was the quiet, undeniable authority of an ocean right before a tsunami hits. Declan hurried down the porch steps, offering a wide, fake smile, extending his hand. "King Cailan, welcome to Blackwood Ridge. We are honored." Cailan ignored the hand. He simply stared down at Declan for a long, uncomfortable moment, his icy gaze sweeping over the Alpha. "Let's get this over with, Hayes. I don't like the smell of your territory." Declan's smile tightened, a flash of humiliation crossing his features before he swallowed it down. "Right this way. The banquet is prepared." Harper kept her eyes glued to her worn black shoes as the Northern King walked past. For a fleeting second, Cailan's footsteps paused right in front of her. A deep, rich scent washed over her. Pine needles, wood smoke, and something uniquely intoxicating, like the sharp bite of frost on a winter morning. Her wolf, usually battered and silent in her mind, suddenly whined, pacing frantically against the edges of her consciousness. "Mate." Harper squeezed her eyes shut, fighting down the panic. No, not him. Not a king. I just need to survive tonight." Cailan lingered for a fraction of a second, a slight frown touching his lips as he caught a whiff of something, cheap concealer over metallic blood, but his towering beta murmured something to him, and they kept walking. The banquet was a chaotic affair in the Great Hall. High-ranking wolves from across the state drank expensive whiskey and tore into roasted meats, while Omegas darted between the massive oak tables, serving and clearing in terrified silence. Harper was assigned to the head table, right where Cailan and Declan sat. Every time she approached with a pitcher of water or a tray of food, she felt Cailan's icy blue eyes tracking her. He wasn't glaring, he was observing, analyzing, watching the stiff, pained way she moved, the slight hitch in her breath when she lifted a heavy silver platter. The tension snapped 2 hours into the feast. Harper was carrying a tray of fresh crystal glasses toward the head table. Jessica Miller, a high-ranking beta female who was desperately trying to catch Declan's eye by emulating his cruelty, stuck her foot out into the aisle. Caught off guard, Harper tripped. She tried to twist her body to protect the tray, but her broken ribs flared with blinding agony. She crashed hard into the hardwood floor, the heavy tray clattering loudly, crystals shattering into hundreds of glittering shards across the room. The loud music and booming laughter instantly died. The hall plunged into a suffocating silence. Declan shot up from his chair, his face contorted in a mask of absolute fury. This was exactly what he feared, embarrassment in front of the Northern King. He saw red. "You clumsy, worthless, pathetic excuse for a wolf," Declan roared, marching around the table toward her. Harper scrambled backward, her hands pressing into the broken glass, ignoring the sharp slices in her palms as she tried to put distance between herself and the Alpha. She tasted the familiar metallic tang of fear. "I'm sorry, Alpha," she choked out, playing the part she had to play. "I was tripped. Silence!" Declan bellowed. He reached down, grabbing Harper by the collar of her shirt, hauling her up to her feet. The fabric dug into her throat, choking her. "I told you what would happen if you embarrassed me tonight, Harper." He pulled his arm back, his massive fist balling tight, aiming right for the already bruised side of her face. Harper squeezed her eyes shut and braced for the impact, praying Toby wasn't watching from the kitchen doors. But the blow never landed. Instead, a sound ripped through the hall, a deep, chest-rattling snarl that vibrated the very floorboards and shattered the remaining intact glasses on the nearby tables. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated primal dominance. A blur of motion tore past the table. Before Declan could even blink, a massive hand clamped around his wrist. The grip was so vice-like, so instantly crushing, that Declan dropped Harper. She fell to her knees, gasping for air, clutching her bleeding hands to her chest. She looked up through her tear-blurred vision. King Cailan Cross was standing between her and Declan. The Northern King's eyes were no longer icy blue. They were glowing a furious, blinding gold. His canines had elongated, pressing against his lower lip. "Touch her again." Kaelin's voice was a dark, rumbling earthquake that commanded absolute submission from every soul in the room. "And I will tear your arm from its socket and beat you to death with it." Declan struggled, his face pale with shock and sudden dawning terror. "King Kaelin, what is the meaning of this? She is my pack member. She is an Omega. I have the right to discipline." Crack! The sound of snapping bone echoed sharply in the silent hall. Declan let out a high-pitched scream, dropping to his knees as Kaelin effortlessly broke the Alpha's wrist with a simple twist of his grip. Kaelin didn't even look at the whimpering Alpha at his feet. Slowly, the giant Northern King turned around and dropped to one knee amidst the shattered glass, completely ignoring the shards biting into his denim. He reached out with large, calloused hands, moving with an agonizing gentleness that stood in stark contrast to the brutal violence he had just displayed. He cupped Harper's trembling face, his thumbs lightly brushing just below the edge of her heavy, makeup-covered bruises. The scent of pine and winter frost enveloped her completely, soothing the frantic, terrified racing of her heart. "Who did this to you?" Kaelin whispered, his golden eyes scanning the cuts, the bruises, the way she favored her ribs. His voice broke with a raw, undeniable possessiveness. "Who broke my mate?" The grand hall of Blackwood Ridge was entirely suffocated by the heavy, oppressive scent of Kaelin's raw Alpha command. It smelled of ozone, snapping pines, and impending violence. Omegas, betas, and even high-ranking pack members were forced onto their hands and knees, their inner wolves submitting to the sheer, terrifying gravity of the Northern King's presence. Kaelin remained kneeling amidst the shattered crystal, completely focused on Harper. His golden eyes traced the harsh, ugly lines of the heavy human concealer, slathered over her cheekbones. With a trembling thumb, he wiped a streak of it away, revealing the angry, purple-black contusion beneath. I tripped," Harper stammered, the ingrained instinct to protect Toby warring with the desperate, intoxicating pull of her mate. Her ribs screamed in protest as she tried to pull away from his touch. "It was an accident. I'm just clumsy." "Do not lie to me, little wolf," Kaelin murmured, his voice a low, soothing rumble that vibrated through her chest, completely at odds with the lethal danger he projected to the rest of the room. "I can hear the fractured bones grinding in your chest when you breathe. I can smell the old, dried blood in your clothes. Who did this?" Before she could answer, a pathetic groan echoed from the floor. Declan Hayes was cradling his mangled wrist, his face slick with a cold sweat. The humiliation of being broken in his own dining hall in front of his entire pack temporarily overrode his survival instincts. "She is my property," Declan spat, struggling to sit up. "She is a defective Omega who repeatedly disobeys direct orders. Under the Lycanthropia Accords of 1998, a regional Alpha has full jurisdiction over disciplinary. The Accords do not cover the systematic torture of your own people, Hayes," a new voice interrupted. A tall, broad-shouldered beta with a jagged scar across his jaw stepped forward from Kaelin's retinue. This was Wyatt, Kaelin's second-in-command. Wyatt didn't even look at Declan. His eyes were scanning the terrified faces of the pack. "Dr. Emmett Walsh," Wyatt called out, his voice sharp and authoritative. "Step forward." The elderly doctor, trembling visibly, stood up from his spot near the wall. He carried a battered leather briefcase. "I ran a background check on this pack's medical expenditures before we arrived," Wyatt stated coldly, addressing Kaelin, who had now stood up, gently pulling Harper to her feet and tucking her safely behind his massive frame. "I found a secondary, encrypted ledger hidden on the servers at Providence St. Vincent Medical Center in Portland." Someone was smuggling human-grade medical supplies and unregistered X-rays under private human aliases to bypass Blackwood's internal audits. Dr. Walsh swallowed hard, looking at Harper, and then at Kaelin. "I did it, Your Majesty. I filed her under the name Eleanor Vance Smith in the human system so Alpha Hayes wouldn't know the extent of her injuries. If he knew she had suffered 3 pneumothoraxes and multiple costochondral separations in the last 2 years, he would have killed her for being a financial liability." A low, guttural snarl ripped from Kaelin's throat. The temperature in the room literally seemed to drop. The Northern King turned his blazing golden eyes back to Declan. Declan, realizing the political and physical trap closing around him, panicked. He looked frantically at his enforcer, Liam Foster. "Don't just stand there. Defend your Alpha. Take them." Liam hesitated, his loyalty fighting his common sense. But before he could draw the silver-laced blade at his hip, the oak doors of the kitchen burst open. "Harper!" 12-year-old Toby stood in the doorway, his eyes wide with absolute terror. He had heard the commotion and the sound of breaking glass. Seeing Harper covered in flour, blood, and surrounded by massive, snarling men, his fragile control snapped. "No, Toby, run!" Harper shrieked, ignoring the agonizing pain in her chest as she tried to step out from behind Kaelin. But Liam, desperate to appease his Alpha and find any leverage against the Northern King, lunged. He grabbed Toby by the collar of his faded flannel shirt, yanking the boy off his feet and pressing a heavy hunting knife to the child's throat. "Back off!" Liam yelled, his voice cracking with panic. "Everyone back off, or the runt bleeds out right here." Kaelin froze, his muscles tensing like coiled steel. He shot a glance at Harper, seeing the absolute, soul-crushing despair shattering her face. "Liam, you idiot!" Declan hissed, clutching his broken wrist. "Kill him! She's been protecting him. Make her watch." "Don't touch him," Harper begged, falling to her knees, her hands clasped in front of her. "Please, Alpha Declan, I'll do anything. I'll take the punishment. Leave him out of this." Liam tightened his grip on the boy. "Say goodbye, Omega." But Toby didn't cry. He didn't whimper, as the cold steel of the knife pressed against his skin, drawing a tiny bead of crimson. Something ancient and deeply buried within the boy's genetics woke up. The years of Harper's beatings, the suppression, the fear. It all became fuel for a dormant, primal fire. The boy's body convulsed. A shockwave of pure, unadulterated energy exploded from him, shattering the nearest windows and sending a violent tremor through the floorboards. Liam screamed as his hands suddenly blistered and burned as if he were holding a live electrical wire. He dropped the knife and stumbled backward, clutching his face. Toby stood up straight. His mousy brown hair seemed to darken, and the cheap brown contacts Harper had bought him literally melted away from the heat radiating from his body. When Toby opened his eyes, they were not the pale yellow of a submissive wolf, nor the bright gold of a standard Alpha. They were a blinding, luminescent, metallic silver. The collective gasp that sucked the oxygen from the grand hall was deafening. "Impossible," Dr. Walsh breathed, falling back onto his knees, his hands shaking as he stared at the boy. "A true Alpha," Wyatt whispered, his hand instinctively dropping from his weapon in a gesture of deep, ancient respect. Declan's face drained of all color. His eyes bulged as he stared at the 12-year-old boy, radiating an aura that rivaled even King Kaelin's. Suddenly, the puzzle pieces fell into place. He looked at Harper, who was sobbing on the floor, and then at the boy. "You hid him," Declan rasped, his voice trembling with a terrifying mixture of dread and insane fury. "You took those beatings. You provoked me, every single day, to keep me from noticing his scent, to keep me from seeing his eyes." "Yes," Harper whispered, tears carving clean tracks through the dirt and makeup on her face. "He's an abomination," Declan shrieked, losing whatever was left of his sanity. A true alpha in his territory meant his absolute ruin. By law, the land belonged to the strongest bloodline. "Kill him, Liam! Kill him now!" Liam, however, was already on his knees, his forehead pressed to the floor in submission to the silver-eyed child. The rest of the Blackwood Ridge pack followed suit. The sheer gravitational pull of a true alpha's aura was impossible for ordinary wolves to resist. Declan, driven mad by the loss of his power, grabbed Liam's discarded silver knife from the floor and lunged at Toby himself. He never made it halfway. Kalen moved faster than the human eye could track. He intercepted Declan mid-air, his massive hand wrapping around the alpha's throat, slamming him down onto the hardwood floor with enough force to splinter the thick oak planks. "Your reign is over, Hayes," Kalen growled, his golden eyes blazing with lethal intent. "By the ancient laws of the Lycan High Council, and as the sovereign king of the Northern Territories, I strip you of your rank, your lands, and your freedom. You are under arrest for the attempted murder of a true alpha, and for the torture of my mate." Declan choked, clawing uselessly at Kalen's iron grip before finally passing out from the lack of oxygen. Kalen tossed the unconscious man aside like a rag doll. He turned his attention back to the room. The terrifying feral king softened instantly the moment his eyes locked onto Harper. He walked over to her, ignoring the awestruck stares of the remaining pack members. He scooped her up into his arms, mindful of her broken ribs. She was so light, so fragile, yet she possessed a strength that humbled him. "You are the bravest creature I have ever met," Kalen whispered into her hair, his scent wrapping around her like a heavy protective blanket. Toby walked over, his silver eyes slowly fading back to their natural, bright green as his adrenaline dropped. He looked up at the giant northern king holding his sister. "Are you going to hurt her?" Toby asked, his voice shaking just a little, though his chin was held high. Kalen looked down at the boy, offering a deep, respectful nod. "Never, young alpha. From this day forward, no one will ever lay a hand on either of you again. My territory is yours." Within 24 hours, Blackwood Ridge was dismantled. Lycan Council authorities from Seattle arrived in unmarked black vans, acting under the guise of an FBI embezzlement raid to the human world. They dragged Declan and Liam away in heavy silver chains. The rest of the pack was absorbed into neighboring territories or placed under the temporary stewardship of Dr. Walsh. Harper and Toby did not stay to watch the fallout. They were placed in the plush, heated back seat of Kalen's armored SUV. As they drove away from the rusted trailer park and the dark, oppressive logging forests of Oregon, Harper looked out the window. For the first time in her life, she wasn't calculating how to survive the next hour. She was just breathing. They traveled far north, deep into the snow-capped Chugach Mountains of Alaska, where Kalen's pack resided. It was a place of sprawling, magnificent estates built into the sides of mountains, completely untouched by the cruelty she had known. In the weeks that followed, Harper was treated by the finest Lycan healers in the world. Her bones knitted back together, her bruises faded, and the perpetual terror that had haunted her eyes was slowly replaced by a quiet, blossoming peace. Toby thrived. Under Kalen and Wyatt's careful tutelage, he began to learn how to control his immense power, training not just to be a wolf, but to be the leader his ancient bloodline demanded. One evening, months later, Harper stood on the vast balcony of Kalen's mountain estate, wrapped in a thick fur blanket. The northern lights danced across the sky in ribbons of emerald and violet. Strong arms wrapped around her waist from behind, pulling her flush against a warm, solid chest. Kalen rested his chin on the top of her head, sighing in deep contentment. "What are you thinking about, my queen?" Kalen asked softly. Harper leaned back into his embrace, watching Toby run through the distant snowdrifts with a group of northern pups, his laughter echoing clearly in the crisp winter air. "I was just thinking," Harper smiled, tracing the strong lines of Kaylin's hand where it rested over her healed ribs, "that I really, really like the cold." Harper's days of being a human shield ended the moment Kaylin walked into her life. In the frozen, beautiful expanse of the north, she finally learned what it meant to be cherished, while Toby grew into the true alpha he was destined to be. The scars on her back faded into memory, replaced by the heavy, comforting weight of a king's crown and a mate's unending, fierce love.